Hello and welcome to week 9 of the PAF podcast. This week we're going back to video games, and I'm joined here today with memes from the Weeb slash Yosarian, and we're gonna be talking about the de-emphasis on the creation of memorable characters in video games, and this would probably pertain to characters like Mario, Sonic, and like characters like Banjo-Kazooie, where it's all colorful and you really they're just memorable characters to latch on to, especially in your childhood, of course. While these days, characters aren't really a focus. You take a look at games like, actually, before I get into it, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Yossarian. I was included in the previous video game podcast, and I'm glad that my friend here was able to invite me to another one of these. And I hope you guys enjoy.
Yep. So let's go into the meat of the problem here. Video games over time, I mean, last time we did discuss an overall decrease in quality of video games, but I think that this is not the case here. I just think the emphasis on characters seems weird to me, and how we are, or how production staffs are approaching the problem is kind of strange, especially because if you create a memorable character, you are obviously bound to make a lot more moolah. I mean, you have games like Knack that try to really create a brand new mascot for children to enjoy, but I think we all know that meme. But take Mario for example. He's so clean, so memorable, and then you take a modern day character like the Fortnite guy, any single character from Fortnite, and the difference is night and day. Like, there's really no reason I would ever choose her. I mean, I of course I remember the body models of Fortnite, but Mario on a more subjective scale is just means a lot more to me as a consumer. When I see a Mario game, I'm like, that is a Mario game. I am expecting at least a level of quality I'm used to.
Yeah, I agree. Because when you look, let's say someone shows you like a Fortnite character compared to a Mario character, you're gonna know instantly what that Mario character is from. You're gonna know him, and you're gonna understand, that you're gonna understand the significance of that character and the importance to the series. It's important. But when you show like a Fortnite character or something, it's drab. It's not necessarily something that's entirely unique, and it's not necessarily something that's gonna sell a product, or it's not gonna show any form of like frontal or visual enjoyment, because it just looks like a random character, instead of like Mario or something that has a lot more of a cartoony and enjoyable and entertaining appearance. You're comparing it's turned into like this normal shooter character.
Yeah, I mean, like you take games nowadays. I'm pretty sure Outer World is out. And a lot of people are hyping it up because it was Obsidian Games' so-called magnum opus. Sometime, I think someone told me that this was going to be one of their greatest productions since New Vegas, right? And on a technical level, I really didn't hear anything about that game, and or its characters for that matter. And similar with Red Dead Redemption. I know some people said the characters were great in that game, but I don't think anyone's gonna remember them compared to like Mario or Sonic. Even I mean, you take a look at Sonic, like his most recent games aren't really that popular, especially considering how memorable he is as a character. The last game that I really think um, was great from the Sonic franchise was Mania, and there's not really a lot to go on to on Sonic himself because he's just kind of had a troubled past, I should say. While I don't really want to get into like titans like Mario and Sonic because Mario and Sonic are not really great examples because they've had literal decades to build upon their reputation. So there's actually newer faces to the game, I should say. Um, it's not contemporary, but it's definitely from our childhood. Like you take characters like Mason from the Black Ops series. That's a pretty memorable character for my generation. A lot of people still bring up the meme, what are the numbers or whatever. And characters like these kind of define how we see future characters when we witness, um, weaker standings in what we're used to. Like it's not so much as that we're offended by how the industry has shifted to just creating gameplay based games. Like all that's coming out now is battle royales, of course, and that's completely gameplay based. And I don't think the consumer base has a problem with that. I don't really have a problem with it either. I just think that the de-emphasis on characters seems a little bit, uh, you know, just seems a little bit strange to me because I really like characters
Yeah,
more. I mean, I like gameplay a lot. Gameplay is my most favorite element of a video game because that's kind of the whole point of the genre, right?
but
Gameplay.
having like a significant protagonist or character, kind of portrays that enjoyment, kind of portrays that uniqueness of that product. You're gonna enjoy something more when you're playing a game that's enjoyable with an enjoyable and cool characters or character. When compared to that, what if it's just a good game but the characters are non-existent or just cookie cutter? You're gonna have a different experience and you're gonna have a different view of that game.
I think one of my major problems with modern characters, you take characters like what was that zombie game that everyone was ranting about for the feminist portrayals of things. It was. Do you know what that game is?
The zombie game.
The zombie game with the girl and they kill the guy Joel.
Oh, Last of Us 2.
Yeah, Last of Us 2, and then you get games like Red Dead and Death Stranding. Those are recent games, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
The focus instead of creating memorable characters like that are colorful and can really show you a lot about the game. Instead, it's gone to narrative importance and like
Correct.
how strong are these characters in the context of the narrative, which I don't think is good. I think characters should be strong in the context of the gameplay because I can get a narrative anywhere. That's my theory on almost anything. Like when I watch anime, I don't value narrative as much because I can get a narrative anywhere. I could read a book if I wanted to. I mean, I haven't read a book in like 5 years, but I'm telling you that I can get a narrative literally anywhere, and it means little to nothing to me. And at the heart of it, right? Characters in their relation to gameplay is what I value most because a video game is you using a remote or your keyboard to control a character or complete a task, right?
Yes.
With gameplay. And that's kind of the main appeal for me.
Yeah.
So when I see that characters like Ellie from The Last of Us, and mind you, I haven't played The Last of Us, so I don't have a valid opinion on this exactly. When I see their relation to the narrative so strongly instead of relation to the gameplay elements, it's kind of weird to me, right? And I'm basing my opinion based off of my friends whose opinions, I semi trust on video games. Definitely not on anime, but video games I can get behind.
Yeah. It's just yeah. It's much more important, in my opinion, for a game to have a better cast or just playable character than a narrative itself, because you're going to be controlling and you're going to be with that character for the entirety of the way. Whereas a narrative, most likely not as much. You're not going to be having frequent cutscenes or just all cutscenes for the most part. There are games that are like heavily narrative based, heavily, but characters are just much more essential in the gaming in a video game format. You're gonna need a good characters. You're gonna need a good character in a game because, like I said, you're gonna be playing the game and you're gonna be playing as that character. I'd rather play as a Duke Nukem more than a Gordon Freeman. A character that has a personality, a character that has, makes you smile whenever you do something, instead of just a character that's completely quiet. And sure, you could argue that a silent protagonist does help in the realm of Half-Life, it does help because it focuses on the visual storytelling. But not all games are focused on the visual storytelling like Half-Life. What if it's a Gordon Freeman silent protagonist in a game that's not like Half-Life, where it's visually storytelling, a lot
Yeah.
of visual storytelling. It's gonna be it's there's not gonna be any like life in it. It's gonna be very drab. I believe you can get away with not having a good or just a protagonist in general if the game itself functions around that. And that's not seen all the time. That's the problem. That's why I think characters should be important. Because unless you already have the mindset of you're going to work around the fact that you don't have a talking protagonist, you're going to want a talking protagonist.
I mean, yeah. I mean, talking protagonists are not always necessary, I don't think, to
Yeah.
creating a great game. Especially because, Mario is the prime example. The only things he says is woohoo and, stuff like that. But I really liked your point on visual storytelling because games like Skyrim and Dark Souls do a lot to enhance the experience on that level, where walking through the world itself is the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your story, actually. It's your story, except in Dark Souls 3, where, your story kind of is super linear. But aside from that, I like when, characters don't have to say much to accomplish much. You accomplish a lot more in gameplay than you do in, forcing a character's narrative down your throat. I think that's a lot more appealing to me as a consumer to buy games in which I'm playing a game and not watching a movie. And that's kind of essentially why I never wanted to pick up Death Stranding, because that's what I heard it was. It was just a 60-hour long movie. And I could pretty much get a movie anywhere and at a better quality for that matter. So, uh, silent characters can be done correctly, and Skyrim and Dark Souls are the prime examples for me at least. But I don't know if there's like a non RPG game where I'd really say that a silent character really does it for me. Because RPGs are kind of meant to tailor to your own experience and your kind of sense of exploration. If you want to just stay passive and only do side quests, you can do that. And if you want to only blast through the story like I do, I like to blast through the story and get straight to the gameplay after, because post game, a lot of things open up. And if you're like me, that's probably what you do. But on the off chance that you like have a game where it's not an RPG, it's not an open world, and you have a silent character, I think that kind of takes away from the experience at that point.
Yeah, it does. It does a lot. When you craft a linear game where a character doesn't talk and it's its own story. It's not your story. It's literally the story of the character you're playing, and that character you're playing is quiet. He doesn't say anything. Doesn't have a personality. Doesn't have any things to say about the world that's around him. I can't really say that there's many games that are able to do a silent protagonist in that type of non RPG genre really well. I mean, I suppose I could go back and say Half-Life again, but even then, I personally think it would benefit with having some type of personality in some way. I think it helps a lot for a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, personality matters a lot in
Yeah.
creating atmosphere, creating tone. I know that, Dark Souls is gritty and somber, while, Breath of the Wild is kind of refreshing and quiet, peaceful, but it has its moments of emotional tension. That is if you play through the story and stuff like that. But it is kind of weird to me how our consumer base has shifted to not really caring. I don't really know where the shift began, actually. Like, people like to see good characters. I'm definitely not in the minority in recognizing that I like gameplay, people like gameplay, and then people like characters as well, but don't care about them as much and would value gameplay. I like this type of crossroads we're at, where we have no idea what essentially is the meta of video games. There is no definition of like what could possibly come out right now.
Yeah,
When you ask
it's
me, yeah, when you ask me about like if someone who's brand new to video games says, "So what's hot right now?" I would obviously battle royale, but that's not the full extent of the answer, right?
yeah,
It's just
correct.
not.
There's many others. Yeah, you could say battle royale, but even just saying battle royale, there's what about like Last of Us 2 that just came out that made a craze? What about a Ghost of Tsushima game that just came out that's made a craze? Among Us that's making a craze right now. It's a lot.
Yeah, there's just a insanely wide variety of games to an insanely wide amount of niches. Like Among Us is a mobile game and it's insanely popular to the point where their servers don't even work. Like how does that even happen sometimes? Like there is no distinct meta. That is what I'm getting behind and most of these games like Among Us and stuff like that, they're not trying to go for any character based gameplay or anything like that. So it's not really a fair criticism. But for games that do go for character based narratives or gameplay, I just don't think anything is memorable these days. And that kind of goes back to the topic of what we're discussing. Like memorability is very important to me. Like when I look back like 20 years down the line, I'll be like, I remember when I played that game. It was really crazy. There was so many gameplay elements that I really enjoyed. The jumping, the fighting combat was outstanding, but it just didn't have a strong character that I really thought was memorable. I can barely remember their face right now. I mean, you think of Mario, of course. His head pops up right in your face. Whether you've played a Mario game or not doesn't matter. Whether you've played a Pokemon game or not doesn't matter. You can probably bring a Pikachu in your head right now, just out of
Yeah,
just out of pure knowledge of you know how popular things like Pokemon are. And it's not even mainstream. It's sort of like people who play Pokemon now are actually niche in my opinion. Like back in the day, I think that a lot of people in my generation, or I don't know why I'm saying that in my generation. That's kind of stupid, but my kind of elementary school and middle school friends all played Pokemon. Pokemon was huge. I know a lot of people got made fun of for playing Pokemon before my generation, I guess, and I really don't understand it because I know a lot of popular, quote unquote, popular kids, right, that love playing Pokemon and love discussing Pokemon and what um, you know builds they're running or what they like to do in Pokemon, and it becomes kind of like some sort of crazy thing for us to just it's not crazy but it's just some normal thing to discuss with your friends, right? And there's no main protagonist in Pokemon
but
that you
it's
really attach
memorable.
to. It's
Yeah,
memorable
there's no.
enough.
Yeah, it doesn't have a main protagonist, but it has a very diverse and unique and entertaining
In a way,
cast
the
of.
Pokemon are the characters that you latch
Yeah,
onto,
yeah,
and the
in a way,
memorability
yeah.
of those Pokemon are essentially the characters, which I think is an interesting dynamic. I mean, turn-based combat nowadays, I can barf whenever I see turn-based combat, especially the new one, Sword and Shield. But like the whole point of Pokemon essentially is not on the character himself, like whether you design him or not. It's pretty much the characters are the Pokemon, and what you do with them, what moves you do, is kind of like building your own gameplay, which is kind of
Yeah,
interesting to me.
you're building your own like group of characters, and they're already from a visual standpoint unique. They're already recognizable. They've already established their point in the medium.
So, what do you think about uh, you know, I guess what we're talking about right now? Because I don't think you've talked that much.
I think it's something that it's just like I said, it's important. I think it's very important to craft the game with something. When you craft a game and when you think of a game and think about making a game with a character or someone that's gonna like be able to be remembered by the player is important. That's something very important because if you make a game with a memorable character or cast of characters, they're going to remember them. They're going to remember them, and when they think of that game, they're going to think about the main cast of people that they played with. What if you didn't, and that person, talked about that game, you wouldn't be able to remember those characters, and that sucks because games are heavily centered around characters a lot of the time. They're heavily centered around what you are because you're playing, right? So if you're going to be playing, then I think personally that character should be somewhat entertaining. It should be somewhat memorable because you're going to be spending all your time as that character.
Uh, okay, you make a fair point. But like spending time with a character and then remembering them is a totally different thing. You can spend 80 hours with a like I don't know. What you can spend 80 hours with just a one-off character and never remember them in your life. So I think that content obviously over you know, just poorly written characters is far better in terms of memorability. I guess we can go into discussion on how to create a memorable character. So how do you create a memorable character? How would you go about it? If you were a production staff, how would you go about it?
Something something that's likable to an extent. But even then, even likability, maybe they're trying to go for someone that's unlikable. Maybe that's the point of that product is to make a character that you hate. But I think that's probably the first thing you need to keep in mind. Whether you want to make the character um, likable or make the character dislikable in that game. And then just when you're making that character, make them entertaining because that's it's a game, and I think that's what games are, right? They're you're gonna be playing them, and you're playing them to be entertained, and characters should be entertaining. If the game is entertaining, then the characters should be entertaining.
Okay, I understand you on that. What I think I would do if I were to create a memorable character, I think I would go for just one word: simplicity. Simplicity can get you a long way, I think, in the creation of a good and memorable character because the simpler their story, the simpler knowledge you have of what are they and will have the players spend less time thinking about what the heck they are or what their background is and more focus on the gameplay itself. I say let the gameplay speak for itself and the character being built through that gameplay is far and wide just how to create a memorable character. And obviously you can't nail this every time. Like you can have insanely great gameplay like Celeste. And its character is like sort of memorable, but I don't even know her name. So it's not nailed all the time. Even if you have outstanding gameplay, it doesn't mean you create a great character. So you obviously have to put focus into the gameplay elements in order to build one. If you do choose so, right? You can just be creating a really easy 2D platformer and you don't really care about the character at all, but you want to have great gameplay. That is fine. There's no harm, no foul on that. In fact, I would prefer that because I tend to hate looking into characters anyway. But uh, and when I say hate, I mean like I dislike being bombarded with a bunch of expository dialogue.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
skip that every single time.
Just having a character that's there to just
Yeah,
function as the remote of playing the game works well too.
yeah. I mean, no one in the right mind, I think. Well, I mean, I don't want to say no one, but I, in the right mind, cannot sit through any dialogue. I will skip it. If there's an option to skip dialogue, I will be skipping it. Even on my first playthrough. Dark Souls, I do not care what anyone says. Skyrim, I don't care what anyone says. Just let me play the game. That's pretty much my interpretation of how to play a video game. People say, "Oh, but you're disrespecting all the time they put into writing that." Um, I don't care. I really don't. I care about playing the game and learning about the character through the elements of the game, and I think that's a fair enough argument. So uh, that's how I would go about creating a memorable character.
Just trying to make a character that doesn't necessarily have to be memorable through narrative or writing, but a character that's memorable through playing the game itself.
Yeah,
You know, like um the main character of Blood. I forget his name right now. Forgive me, but there's you don't really know a lot about him. You know, there's no cutscenes, there's no narrative, but you know enough about him while you're playing to enjoy. He does his one-liners. He has a deep voice. He's villainous. He sounds villainous, and that it works. That's why people like that character a lot. You know, people like a character like Serious Sam not because they have narrative and like 10 out of 10 writing, but it's because it complements the gameplay. It complements what you're going to be doing the entire time, and that's playing. You're going to be hearing, you're going to be playing, and the character you're playing as is going to talk. They're going to build a personality and build a relationship with the player without having to be lines of dialogue. It's going to complement the gameplay itself, and that's good.
yeah, and I think that in my childhood at least, I played a lot of Lego Star Wars and Lego Harry Potter, I suppose, and there's no dialogue in that game. It's simply the voice actors making random sounds like "Rrr," and when they're trying to do talking and stuff like that. And these characters, I mean, obviously I've seen the movies and seen or read the books and stuff like that, but even if you haven't and you were just playing those games because your grandma got it for you or whatever, um, you can learn about the characters simply through the gameplay in that game. I don't think it's very hard to
Correct.
understand it,
Yeah.
especially in a simple children's game like Lego Harry Potter, right? You can
Hmm.
understand what's going on even with minimal sounds, with like Voldemort going like her or something like that.
You can tell
Um,
like who's who. You can tell who's like
you
the
can you
bad.
can
You can
you
tell
can
who's the
tell
good.
who it is, right? And
Yeah.
games these days, spend so much time building up villains and stuff like that when it's so simple. Like I said, simplicity is key. You don't have to pour hours of time into creating these characters if the gameplay speaks for itself. I don't need anyone to tell me that these guys are wizards when I'm playing the game and finding out they're wizards themselves by pressing B button, right? It's kind of obvious to me, right?
You're gonna learn it through gameplay, which is that's what a game is. That's what you're gonna be playing. You're gonna be playing the gameplay. So why not learn about the characters via the gameplay instead of having to read lines
Yeah,
to
and
learn about the
I mean, if I
character?
wanted to learn more about the nuances of the characters and like gain a deeper understanding of what exactly is the world I'm playing in, there are books for that. There are countless lore videos that you could
Yeah.
easily look up. There's no shortage of content you could consume. I mean, for more niche titles like indie games, those would be a lot harder to find, and you'd probably find them on really outdated forums. But you still have a wide amount of accessibility to that type of content, and your depth of knowledge only matters to you. Essentially, like no one's gonna care if you know every single facet of Skyrim. Well, I mean, I know what happens when you brew this potion and then throw it into that knowledge only matters to you, and you can impress people for sure. I find it impressive when someone knows everything about a game, like Dark Souls or whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, you learn that knowledge because it mattered to you, and you played the game because it mattered to you. And this is all subjective, right?
Hmm.
To wind this up, I suppose we go full circle here and go back to my point that I have no problem with today's market. I mean, I have problems with the quality of the market, but on a
Yeah.
character basis, I don't have a problem with today's market. We're a gameplay focused market where characters don't really matter and memorability doesn't really matter. But at the root of it, I value gameplay, so this kind of meta is sort of enjoyable for me, I think.
Yeah. I agree. It's just it's just being able to present a good game and then having some type of placeholder that's at least just complements the enjoyability of the game as a whole is what matters the most.
Yeah. Anyhow, that's gonna do it for this week's podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed. I definitely did. This was a pretty good one, I think.
Yeah, I liked it.
And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.